the slide to the yes. So we'll be welcoming Madam Shobha to take us now on
Yes.
women's voices, rights, and representation, and why inclusive democracy is a gender justice issue. Our feminist woman, you're welcome, ma'am.
Thank you very much. And hello
Yes,
once
ma'am.
again, my sisters, resistors, and persisters. I'm really honored and humbled to be a part of this important discussion on who speaks for women, where decisions are made. And I thank the African Girls Empowerment Network for giving me this opportunity.
Thank you
Well,
very much, ma'am. So please, sorry, ma'am, before you
yes,
proceed, can we all open
yes.
our cameras again? Let's just take a picture, please, a group picture with everyone. Briefly,
Okay,
please move
okay,
on, continue.
okay, thank you.
Thank
Well,
you.
it is we women who have to speak for ourselves and make others speak too. Friends, as we all know, today women make up roughly half of humanity and a large share of voters in most democracies. This has been achieved through the hard-won gains of the global female suffrage movement, which began in the 19th century and making New Zealand the first country in the world in which women had the right to vote in parliamentary elections. But let us not forget that sadly we still have three countries, Afghanistan, Eritrea, and Vatican City, where women do not even have the right to vote. Forget about standing for places of supremacy. However, numerical strength in the electorate does not translate into power in decision making, as my earlier speakers have so rightly said. Across the world, women remain underrepresented in parliaments, political parties, cabinets, local governments, and other centers of decision making. Globally, women hold only about 27.5% of parliamentary seats and 22.4% of cabinet positions. Out of 193 countries, only 7 countries have reached 50% women in parliament. And just 14 countries have achieved 50% female representation in their cabinet positions. But this is not enough. Here I am reminded of the famous US Supreme Court Judge Ruth Bader Ginsburg. In 2010, she was she was asked in an interview. There were 3 Supreme Court female judges at that time. Earlier, they had been all male judges in a 9 court bench. She was asked, when would you be happy to have enough women in the Supreme Court? And she said, I'll be happy when all 9 are women, because men have been ruling the Supreme Court for so long, it is time for women to take over. Currently, only 28 countries are led by a woman serving as a head of state or head of government, and more than 100 countries have never had a woman head of state. And at the current global rate of progress, true gender parity in the highest position of political power is estimated to take over 130 years. This is ridiculously pathetic. How can women be a significant part of the electorate and yet remain underrepresented? When we talk about democracy, we often begin with a simple idea: one adult person, one vote. But a democracy cannot be truly inclusive if half of its population is expected mainly to vote while remaining underrepresented in places where laws and policies are made. Women's political participation is a fundamental democratic and human right. The right to vote is important, but political equality cannot end at the ballot box. If women have the legal right to vote but face social, economic, cultural, and institutional barriers that prevent them from influencing political decisions, then equality exists merely on paper and not in practice, as my earlier speakers have mentioned. A feminist understanding of democracy asks not only how many women are present in politics, but also asks, do women actually exercise political agency, get to define the priorities of society, influence decisions, shape budgets and public policies, and represent constituencies? A democracy cannot be fully inclusive if half of its population is expected mainly to vote while remaining underrepresented in places where laws are made. Women's political representation is too often reduced to a statistic. We hear the numbers, how many women sit in parliament, how many hold cabinet posts, and so on. But from a feminist perspective, it is not simply a problem of insufficient numbers. It is a question of rights, equality, power, and justice. Inclusive democracy is a gender justice issue. I'm not saying that numbers do not matter. Of course they do, because presence matters. But presence without power does not deliver equality. What we need is not simply more women, but the redistribution of political power so that women's voices shape the agenda itself. Adequate women representation matters because political institutions make decisions about issues that directly affect women's lives, like healthcare, including sexual health, education, employment, wages, land and property, social protection, family law, violence against women, child care, and access to justice. When women are excluded from these decisions, policies are shaped without reflecting women's lived realities. When half the population is missing from the rooms where laws are written, budgets are set, and security is defined, these decisions are incomplete and often damaging. The goal is not to just place a few women in positions of authority. The goal is to challenge systems of power that have historically treated political leadership as predominantly male and to ensure that women from different backgrounds can participate equally. One major barrier that women face is the existence of patriarchal social norms. And I repeat, patriarchal norms. Politics has traditionally been associated with masculine qualities such as authority, aggression, and public leadership, while women have been associated with caregiving and nurturing. Stereotypes continue to associate leadership with masculinity. Women may therefore be told often, explicitly or implicitly, that politics is not their cup of tea. Also, women are frequently judged by different standards. They are often judged on their appearance and family status and in ways men rarely are. Their competence is more frequently questioned, their authority more easily undermined. A male politician may be described as decisive. A woman displaying the same behavior may be labeled aggressive. A man may be seen as ambitious. A woman may be criticized for being selfish or for neglecting her family if she's equally ambitious. There are other barriers too. Political participation requires time and money. Women often carry a disproportionate share of unpaid domestic and care work. A woman who is responsible for child care, elder care, household work, and paid employment has less time available for political organizing or campaigning. Political parties decide who receives nominations, funding, and organizational support. If party structures are dominated by men, women can be systematically disadvantaged even before voters enter the polling booth. Women who do enter politics can also face sexual harassment, intimidation, and violence, including online abuse. The objective is not merely to disagree with women politically, but to silence them, to make public participation so difficult for them that they withdraw. These double standards demonstrate that political inequality is not simply about whether women are allowed into the room. It is also about what happens once they are inside the room. So what must change for women to have not only a vote, but an equal voice? It is obvious that giving everyone the same legal right to vote does not automatically create equal political power. We need measures that address structural barriers. The first important step is increasing women's representation through mechanisms such as quotas and reservations where appropriate. These measures can help challenge political systems in which long-standing practices repeatedly favor men. But one thing is very clear. Representation should not stop at increasing numbers. We need political institutions that are genuinely inclusive. Institutions where women can speak, disagree, lead, and influence outcomes without being dismissed or punished for doing so. Secondly, political parties must change and give women equal access to nominations, leadership positions, campaign financing, and training. Political parties must also address harassment and discrimination within their own structures. Thirdly, we need to confront the unequal distribution of care work, with women bearing a disproportionately large burden of it. Public investment in care infrastructure is a political demand because unpaid and disproportionate care work is one of the most powerful forces keeping women out of power. Affordable childcare, parental leave, social protection, and equitable sharing of domestic responsibilities can expand women's abilities to participate in public life. As long as care is feminized, equality in public life will remain incomplete. Fourthly, women in politics must be able to participate safely. Gender-based political violence, intimidation, sexual harassment, and online abuse operate as a form of political policing. Threats of rape, death, and public humiliation are used to drive women out of public life or deter them from entering it in the first place. Fifth, representation must be intersectional. A narrow elite of women in power does not constitute gender justice. It is not enough to have a few privileged women at the top. We must include those whose voices remain missing, like women from marginalized communities, women with disabilities, working class women, women with diverse sexual identities, and others who experience multiple forms of exclusion. But more importantly, we need a societal transformation. We must dismantle the belief that leadership is inherently masculine and that women's primary responsibility is within the home. Girls should grow up seeing women as decision makers, negotiators, and organizers. Boys should grow up understanding that equality is not a threat to them, but a foundation of a healthier democracy. Here, I'm tempted to share with you and mention a recent happening in India which appeared as a thin silver lining in the dark clouds looming above us. A male political leader of the opposition party organized a first of its kind women-only program, an all-female students' rally that was attended by an unprecedentedly large number of females. And among other pertinent discussions around gender equality, he directly hit at patriarchy, bang on spot, and smashed it. Every word of his hit home. He rightly remarked, "You have a relationship with your father, your brother, your husband, your son, but you do not belong to them. You belong to yourself, and you have to show that belonging." I cannot recount any other male, forget about a politician, standing up against patriarchy in a public forum and calling for an end to it. We need more of such discussions to become the norm. Women need political systems that pay heed to their voices. Women have always had voices. They have organized, resisted, protested, voted, built movements, and demanded justice. The challenge is to transform institutions so that these voices have equal political power. So the goal should not simply be more women in politics. The goal is equal influence and equal power to shape the decisions that affect our lives. Women's representation is not a favor granted to women. It is a matter of democratic legitimacy. And when women can participate equally, not only as voters, but as leaders, decision makers, and agenda setters, democracy itself becomes more representative, more accountable, and more just. Inclusive democracy is not possible without gender justice, and gender justice is not possible without women's equal voice and power. When women have only a vote and not an equal voice, democracy is incomplete. When half the population is structurally excluded from shaping the decisions that govern their lives, justice is denied. Our demand is not for gradual inclusion on the existing terms. Our demand is for transformation of political power itself so that women's voices in all their diversity become authoritative and decisive. That is what gender justice requires. Before I close, I invite you all to be part of a very important She and Right session on the theme of countering anti-rights pushes and upholding human right to health and gender equality, which is scheduled to happen on Friday, that is day after tomorrow, at 3:30 p.m. Geneva time.